Today, so we want to get right on it so that I can get through with what I have planned for the day. How can we pray for y'all this morning? Let's continue to pray for the Plums, for Ken. Ken had a really good night last night, got a lot of sleep, and woke up refreshed. Well, more refreshed this morning than before. But let's keep praying for Ken that he would continue to heal and he'd be able to come home soon. I know he and Barb and Steve, their son, are appreciative of all of your prayers, and those of you that made meals, it's been a huge blessing to them. So thank you so much, but let's keep praying for them. Anything else we can pray for this morning? All right, let's pray. Father in heaven, we are thankful to be together this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to gather together and meet together. I trust that this special time where we obey your word to come together as this local body of Christ would be an encouragement, that every one of us would be encouraged this morning. Lord, would you lift up those whose hands are weak, whose knees are feeble? Would you strengthen them? Would they be rooted and grounded in your Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ? Would you bless the preaching and teaching of the word this morning? We do pray for Ken Plum. We continue to pray for his recovery and healing, and we're thankful for how you have worked in his life so far, even though you allowed him to go through some harder things in this recovery. We're grateful that he had a good night last night and that he got some sleep and was able to rest better than he has. Would you continue to help him? Would you continue to help him to heal? And Lord, we will rejoice as he recovers enough to be able to go home. And pray for Barb and Steve. We'd give them strength as they are in the hospital every day at Ken's side. Lord, continue to comfort them. Give them a peace that passes understanding and help them, Lord. And we're just thankful for all that you do. Bless this time now as we look at these pictures from Jordan and how they relate to the Bible. Would you use those in our mind's eye to make the Bible come alive as it did for me when we were there? I pray that these pictures would do at least part of that for us this morning and help us to understand our Bibles just a little better. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. We are on day 5, and day 5 was a big one because we got to go to Petra. Petra was pretty much the main thing we did this day. We are now, we've left the country of Egypt. We are in the country of Jordan, and we left our hotel fairly early in the morning, and we traveled to Petra in Jordan. So we had stayed in a hotel right on the Red Sea, just across the border of Egypt, Israel, into Jordan. And then in the morning, we woke up and we drove north until we got to Petra, which is right about there. And we spent the bulk of our time there in Petra. Got a couple of videos for you. This is just downtown Amman, Jordan. This isn't Amman. This is on the way to Petra. So this is just one of the cities in Jordan, just to give you kind of an idea of what the country of Jordan is like. Very different from Egypt, different from Israel, primarily more of a Arab country. So you can kind of get that flavor as you were going. This is Petra. We arrived. This is the parking lot. Got to get a picture of the sign everywhere you go. That's helpful. There's Pastor Jason's mom. If you didn't know Pastor Jason's mom, there she was. She was so excited to be at Petra. This is one of her favorite places. I think she had been once before and didn't quite have the stamina to do everything she wanted. So she was like, this was like years of preparation for her to come back. So she was just like a kid in a candy store. And then this is Chad Myers. He and I went to school together at Maranatha way back in the day, and so we were on that same tour. And so Chad, myself, and my wife, we kind of stuck together through this Petra tour. And I forget how many steps I got this day. It was well over 20,000 steps this day. So we covered a lot of ground, but it was beautiful. This is, as you're walking into Petra, this is called the Sikh. It is the main entrance. It's a dramatic entrance to the Nabatean city of Petra in Jordan. You go through this narrow gorge that's carved in the sandstone, and it's almost a mile as you're walking through this narrow gorge. It's got these towering, winding walls that rise between 300 to 600 feet high, and they pinch in certain spots. You're about 3 meters across, so it's beautiful. It captures the light really well. Like if you can see here, the light shining in on the sandstone is just gorgeous. So depending on the time of day you go through the Seek, it will look different just depending on the light, and it was breathtaking. Here's just a little bit of a video to show you what the Seek was like. And yeah, we captured very many pictures while we were here at Petra, so it was hard to boil them all down and pick just a few. This is walking into the Seek. Also in the Seek, carved along the side, you had these little aqueducts that would carry water, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. Loved walking through this first area. And it was just like, just everywhere you looked, you just couldn't get enough. This is at the end of the Seek. You come through this narrow opening, and you see the light at the end there. You come to the end of the Seek, and at the end, you get what's called the treasury. And if you've ever seen Indiana Jones, I forget which movie it is, but the treasury is featured in that film, so it's pretty famous from that perspective. But here it is in Petra, and you get this walking out of the Seek, this narrow corridor, and then it just kind of opens up into this grand view of the treasury and the beginning of Petra proper. So it's pretty fantastic. But here is the treasury. It's carved directly into the rose red sandstone cliff by Nabateans. They actually copied Greek architecture, I think Greek and Roman architecture here, and so they started carving this at the top, and the top of the structure is actually wider than the bottom of the structure. If you were actually to go up and measure it, so it starts wide and then gets narrower. Anybody know why it starts wide and gets narrower? They got tired, yeah. It's actually so that when your eye looks at it, it looks uniform going all the way up. If they were to make it the same width going all the way up, it would actually not look uniform. And so they learned some of those carving techniques from the Greeks and the Romans to make these structures pretty grand. At the top of, I thought this was interesting, at the top of the treasury, there was, you can't really see it, but there was a big kind of vase looking thing, and they at one time thought that this was I think was it Egyptian, like the Egyptian pharaohs stored their treasure in that location, and so there was riches in gold, and so there's actually bullet holes that you can see that they shot into that vase at the top of the treasury because they thought Egyptian gold was going to pour out onto the streets and they were going to be rich, but it was just sandstone. So they were fooled by that. It is actually, even though it's called the treasury, it is believed to be a tomb, a mausoleum of the Nabatean king, Artus IV. And so they actually found, at the base of the treasury, they actually found several different tombs where people were buried. So this is just an elaborate mausoleum. Here is some of the views of Petra once you get inside of the city. It's basically cliff dwellings, and there are all of these structures that are built out of rocks, and then you can see in the distance there are caves that are carved in the rock, and these caves and these structures, they just go on for miles and miles and miles and miles. So it's just breathtaking, it's beautiful. Here we climbed up to the top of some of those cave structures that we were looking at the bottom, and these are the royal tombs. So again, here are more tombs And you got those pillars carved into the sandstone, but then you go inside and you see the mausoleums or the tombs where these royals would have been buried. And look at the ceiling. That is all natural rock. That is not painted. That is just natural carved rock. And it was incredible and beautiful and pretty amazing. But this particular tomb is called the Urn Tomb. It's one of the more magnificent royal tombs in Petra. It gets its name from the urn-shaped decoration on top of the pediment, and we just loved going through these different tombs and seeing the beauty inside of them. Again, here's that inside of that, and the ceilings. Especially, it looks like somebody got up there with a paintbrush and painted a painting, but that's just all natural rock. Here's another picture of a different royal tomb. I didn't get the name of this one, but there's just many of these different royal tombs and all of those different areas that are carved into the rock where bodies would have been buried, and then you've got the elaborate ceilings and we're like several hundred feet up in the air in the side of a mountain, looking into this here tomb. Again, there's more of those ceilings. That's not paint, even though it looks like it. It was just beautiful. This is kind of humorous. We kind of took a off the beaten path trek, and we came to this gorge. And it's at least 150 feet down where I'm standing on that bridge. And you can see what the bridge is made of. I don't like heights. So not only could you see through the bridge, but that structure, the metal that's on that bridge is all uneven. So as you're walking, your feet are kind of doing this in that uneven metal. And I was not enjoying it. And at the other side of that bridge was a local Bedouin, and he thought I was pretty funny. He was laughing at me the entire time. But there were Bedouins all over the place with mules, horses, camels, and you could pay them, and they would take you all over Petra for you if you didn't want to walk. But we preferred to walk. Caves. There are cave structures all over the place. You kind of like every corner you turn, you find more and more opportunities for people would have lived and dwelt and all of these things. So this is actually, we got to sit down and in one of the local shops, and we had our Bible study there at Petra. And this is one of the pastors that went on the tour. He pastored out in Pennsylvania, but he actually, when he was younger, when he was doing his MDiv, he actually came out to one of the seminaries in Jerusalem and spent a year in Jerusalem studying there. So he knew a lot about the different archaeology, and he had been there quite a few times, and he was kind of a pretty good font of knowledge. And he actually got us thinking about a potential biblical use for Petra. Like, where does Petra show up in the Bible? There's no specific mention of Petra, but a lot of believers think the Lord is going to use Petra during the tribulation. Anybody think how Petra might be used during the tribulation? Yeah. So in Revelation 12, verses 1 to 6, we read this: "And a great sign appeared in heaven." This is John kind of summarizing through a vision the history of the nation of Israel. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them down to the earth. This is a reference to Satan and the angels, third of the angels that fell. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth. The woman here is representing Israel. The one that she's about to give birth to is the Messiah, Jesus. And so that when she bore her child, he might devour it, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, if you can remember back to the sermon that we did in Daniel chapter 9, talking about the Daniel's 77s and the 70th week, which is the tribulation. And the 70th week isn't a literal week, but it's 70 weeks of years. So 1 week is 7 years. Well, when we take the 1,260 days, how many years is 1,260 days? 3.5 years. So what very significant event happens at the midpoint of the tribulation? 3.5 years into the tribulation, what happens? The Antichrist, there's a specific event that happens. He defiles the temple at 3.5 years. So probably the first 3.5 years, the Antichrist actually makes a treaty with the Jews, and the Jews have relative peace for the first 3.5 years. But then the midpoint, 3.5 years, he defiles the temple, and he attacks Jews. He is a servant of Satan, and he is going after the Jews. In fact, Jesus talks about that in Revelation 12:6. So at that midpoint of the tribulation, the Jews are going to flee into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, how many Jews are there going to be in the tribulation when they flee into the wilderness? We don't know the exact number, but we know there's going to be 144,000 witnesses that will be part of that number, and perhaps even more. So where are you going to find a place that is big enough, that has the infrastructure in the wilderness that will hold at least 144,000 Jews? Well, a lot of people think it's Petra. And so this is the place in the wilderness where they're going to flee. Again, another biblical passage talking about this, Matthew 24:15 and 16, this is Jesus. He says, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel," who's the abomination of desolation? It's the Antichrist, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, "standing in the holy place." Where's the holy place? It's the temple. What is he going to do? He's going to defile it at the midpoint of the tribulation, 3.5 years in. Then it says, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. And actually there are verses in Isaiah that talk about Israel when she flees into the mountains, she's going to flee into Edom, and Petra is a part of ancient Edom. And so a lot of biblical scholars think that Petra is the place that the Jews are going to flee to in the mountains of Edom, where God is going to protect his people for those final 3.5 years of that tribulation. Incredible sights, though. We had so many pictures. It's hard for me to pick which pictures to show you and which not. If you ever get the chance to go to Israel, Petra is kind of like one of those optional, hey, you can do this, it's a little bit more, but you don't have to. And if you get the chance, go. It was one of the highlights of our trip. Well worth going. There were tourist traps everywhere. There was camels that you could sit on and ride and take your pictures with. And then there were these little Bedouin shops set up everywhere where you could go and purchase things. And they knew how to tug on your heartstrings. Chad, the guy that was with us, was buying things for his kids back at home and ended up buying something from a Bedouin woman because she basically said, I've been out here all day and I haven't sold anything to feed my family. Would you please buy this for me? And she got him, and he bought something for her. And then as we were going by other Bedouin shops, the other ladies sitting out there the same exact thing that they were saying. So they were well versed. They knew how to get tourists to buy their wares, but we enjoyed it. Just beautiful structures carved everywhere. This is an amphitheater that's carved into Petra, just massive. It's hard to show you. There's too much to see in a day. We asked our local Jordanian guide, how long would it take to really see all of Petra? And she said minimum 5 days. You could spend 5 days there, and if you really wanted to see everything Petra had to offer. So one of the places we kind of got off the main tourist beaten path, and we went down this road that maybe we weren't supposed to go on, and that actually ended up being where a lot of the Bedouins actually lived. So they actually live in Petra, and they have tents there. And we were riding along, and one of the Bedouins comes riding up on a donkey, and he says, "Where are you going?" And we're just like, "Oh, we're just walking." And he said, "Oh, my home's right up there." And he invited us in for coffee or tea. We didn't have the time, so we said, "No, sorry, we can't do that." But there are actually Bedouin people here, and they live right there on that site, and they are part of Petra's culture, and they work as guides and camel herders and artisans, and so we ran out of time. We were headed up to in Petra. We were headed up to a place. Was it called the monastery? Sharon, is that where we were going? So the monastery was quite a hike, where you had to hike up into a mountain and through a kind of a narrow ravine and get all the way back into this place called the monastery. And we got, maybe 3/4 of the way there, and then realized we have to turn around or we're going to miss the bus. But we got way up into the mountains. We were able to turn around and take a picture from the mountains looking back down into Petra, and just a beautiful, beautiful location. Then the other thing we did that day is we stopped at Wadi Musa, is the local town, the city that Petra is in, and then they also had this ancient site. This is one of those small T traditional sites where they think the Rock of Moses is, and of course the Rock of Moses, when they were wandering through the wilderness, what did Moses do to the rock when the children of Israel were thirsty? He struck the rock the first time, and then he was supposed to speak to the rock, and he disobeyed. You get that whole. But out of the rock came water, and so they've got this rock right there in Wadi Musa, and out from under the rock comes this natural spring, and so they've kind of capitalized on that and said, "This is the rock that Moses struck." And do I think that's the rock that Moses struck? No, but that's where they think it is, and so it was an interesting thing to stop and take pictures at, and this was one of the things we got to see. Now, when you're driving in a foreign country, you will see things on the road that you will never expect in your life that you would see, and this one made our whole tour bus laugh. You were wondering how many camels you could fit into the bed of a small Toyota pickup truck? Now you know. At least 3. And I don't know. Ron could afford to do that. I don't know. Maybe. We got quite the chuckle out of that one. So that was the end of day 5. We ended up traveling up to Amman and spending the night in Amman. And then day 6 in Amman, this is our final day in Jordan. We went and we visited the Amman Citadel. We went to Mount Nebo. We stopped at a mosaic shop, and then we ended up at the Mediterranean Sea. And so here we started in Amman, which is the capital of Jordan. And we went to the Citadel in Amman, and then we drove down and saw Mount Nebo. And then we spent most of our day right here, crossing the river from Jordan to Jericho, because it was a tiny little stretch of road, but to go through customs on the Jordanian side and to get into Israel on the other side took all day. I think I started my watch. I didn't take a picture of this, but I think it was about 6 hours of just getting across the bridge, across the Jordan River. It took us about 6 hours. And then we ended up driving. Once we did that, we drove up north of Tel Aviv to a city up here on the Mediterranean Sea, and that's where we spent the night. But we started in Amman, and this is the capital of Amman, Jordan. Beautiful area. That's kind of what the Amman looks like. The buildings are all similar in size, and we got up really early and got to see the sunrise over the capital. And the first thing that we went to was the Amman Citadel, and this is the biblical site of Rabbah. Now, who can tell me the biblical significance of Rabbah? It's in the book of Samuel. 2 Samuel, during the reign of King David. All right. Here is the backside of the citadel of Amman and biblical Rabbah. Let me read this. 2 Samuel 11, verse 16. And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. So when Israel went out to war, and David did not go with them, but stayed back in Jerusalem and sinned with Bathsheba, and then attempted to cover up his sin by having Uriah the Hittite basically murdered. This is the place that Israel was fighting against. They were in Amman. This is Rabbah in the Bible. And here we're actually at the backside of the fortress, because the backside of the fortress is the only area large enough for an army to attack. And there are deep valleys on all other sides of the citadel, making an attack impossible. So this is pretty certain, like very, very certain, that this is exactly where Uriah would have been sent to die. And we got to stand kind of at the base of the wall. I don't know if I back up one, you can kind of see here the different stones. You've got the larger stones on the bottom and then the more smooth stones on the top. So the way archaeology works is the lower you go, the older the structure is. So these lower stones that look different from these upper stones, they would have been more ancient than these upper stones, but this would have been the place where Uriah the Hittite was sent to die, at the citadel of Amman. Then we got the drive through downtown Amman. And what is this? And then does anybody know what these tall guys are here? What are we looking at there? We're looking at a mosque. And these are the spinnerets of the mosque. And on all of these spinnerets, do you know what is on all of these spinnerets in every mosque that you see? There's a big loudspeaker attached up there. And you know why there's a loudspeaker attached up there? Call to prayer. And every mosque has its imam, and they don't just like play a pre-recorded message, call to prayer. Every mosque has its own imam, and his job is to get on some kind of microphone 5 times a day and do this eerie chant. I actually had a video recording of it, but whoever videoed it started the video like this and then went like, no, they started it like this and then went like this, so we had to watch it like this, and I didn't have the time to edit it. But at some point, I have some video clips of what that call to prayer sounds like, and they're everywhere, especially when you get to Jerusalem. They're everywhere, and so you hear calls to prayer going out in Jerusalem, and yeah, it gets some really interesting eclectic mixes of religion when we get to Jerusalem. But local shops, they're selling bread here on the side, and then they've got fruit stands on the side there as well. You couldn't eat any of the fruit in Jordan unless it was inside of a peel. So you couldn't eat anything like an apple or a strawberry or anything that wasn't inside of a peel. Anybody know why you couldn't eat the fruit unless it was in a peel?
Bacteria and germs.
Because they washed all of their fruit with their local water, and their local water was full of things that our American digestive systems couldn't handle. And even having the fruit just being washed in the water, if you would have eaten that fruit, you would have had a bad time of it. In fact, we had quite a few people in our tour group that ignored that advice, and they had a bad time of it. And yes, Jason's mom got to play nurse for much of the week and ran dry on medication towards the end. So we went to a mosaic shop. Every country that we went to, they had some kind of shop that they took you to, and they tried to sell you things. Do you remember in Egypt, we went to the papyrus shop? Remember I passed around the papyrus? You got to hold that? And you could buy papyrus, handmade papyrus. Well, here you could buy handmade mosaics, and beautiful, and there the lady is gluing in those small pieces of mosaic. You can notice that we were there in January, February, so it's the winter, and you can notice that she's all bundled up. She's cold. But some of these mosaics were 6 figures. And you could buy them if you wanted, and they would ship them for free right to your house. You just had to pay them 6 figures, and they were beautiful. We didn't buy any, sorry, but that was an interesting thing that we did. Then we went to Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo. Anybody know the significance of Mount Nebo in the Bible? What important event happened at Mount Nebo? Sometimes called Pisgah. We've got a song, Pisgah's Lofty Heights, old hymn. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. This is...
See the promised land but not enter.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, good. This is where Moses would have died. This is where Moses was led up to the top of Mount Nebo so that he could see the promised land, but he was not allowed to enter into it. Why wasn't he allowed to enter into the promised land, kids?
Because he struck the rock instead of talking to it.
That's right, because he struck the rock a second time instead of speaking to the rock. And so God said, you can see the promised land, but you're not going to enter into it. This is also where Balaam, do you remember Balaam and his donkey? This is where Balaam tried to curse the Israelites, and God forbid him to do that as well. So a couple of different things Mount Nebo is. So here we are, standing at the top of Mount Nebo, looking down, and you lose all sense of height in pictures, but we're looking down, and it was a very hazy day, the day that we were there, but this is the Jordan River Valley right over here. Jericho is right up in here, and if we could see, you'd be able to see the Sea of Galilee up here and the Dead Sea down here, and you'd be able to see Jerusalem over here. We couldn't see any of it because it was hazy that day, so it was a little bummer. But Deuteronomy 34 says in verse 1, Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negeb and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said to him, This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows the place of his burial to this day. So this would have been exactly the place where God would have led Moses up onto the top of the mountain. He would have seen all of those things before he died.
It's a green area.
This is our guide.
The river runs from the north, and it
Jihan.
supplies the Dead Sea with water. It's almost 18 kilometers far from Mount Nebo, but even though you can't see it from here, because the river shrank, a level of water dropped down, and both sides are surrounded with tropical trees. That's why it looks green, but you can't see the water. And it runs from the Sea of Galilee, and it supplies the Dead Sea with water. And this means that the Jordan Valley is in both sides of the river, at both sides of the river. Half of it is in the Jordanian side, half of it is in the Israelite side. During normal clear days, you will see Jericho at the bottom. Jericho is the lowest city in the whole world. It's in the same elevation of the Dead Sea. And during the normal clear days, you will see Jerusalem, 11 o'clock on the top of the mountain. Even the Holy of Holiness will be that much clear from the top there during the clear days. But remember, usually people cannot see the Holy of Holiness.
So her name was Jihan. She's a very good guide. She actually was from a Baptist church, and she called it a born-again church. That was kind of the way they differentiated it. I think her dad was Catholic, and her mother was Eastern Orthodox, and she ended up at a Baptist church, a born-again church. So she would call us brothers and sisters, and that was a pretty neat thing. This, at the top of Mount Nebo, they had some kind of a cathedral, some kind of a church, and they had all these different mosaic things in there. This is like Byzantine area. That stuff was less interesting to me. I was really there for the biblical stuff, so we took pictures of the mosaics, but I don't know a lot of the details about it. There on the left, you've got the big sculpture. What is that sculpture depicting from the Bible? Yes. Yeah, that would have been the rod that was lifted up in the wilderness when the people were getting bitten by snakes. Obviously, this is an artist's rendition of it, not the actual one. But that was at the top of Mount Nebo as well. All right, as we were driving down, this is the brown desert of Jordan. And you would see shepherds here guiding their sheep to the little tiny patches of green that they would find. So we were up on Mount Nebo, and this is what it looked like, brown. And then we drove down Mount Nebo into the Jordan Valley River, and we got to the Jordan River, and look at how everything changes. Everything turned green, and I probably will have more pictures later, but there were just miles and miles and miles of palm trees, date palms, pomegranates, mangoes, avocados, tomatoes. I mean, just every square inch of usable agricultural soil in Israel is used. And they actually use the Jordan River pretty heavily for this. 95% of the water that flows from the Sea of Galilee in the north down to the Dead Sea in the south, 95% of the water actually gets siphoned away and used. And only 5% of the water makes it to the Dead Sea. And as a result, the Dead Sea is drying up. It's shrinking. And we'll show you some of those pictures. But what do they do with all that water? Well, the Jordan River, half of the Jordan River is in the country of Jordan. Half of the Jordan River is in the country of Israel. And so both countries utilize that water, and they use it for drinking, and they use it for agriculture. So you've got these very lush and verdant and green pastures. And remember, I said we don't have pictures of this because that's just that awful. But crossing into Jericho took 6 hours, and they were so concerned we had to answer all of these questions. They wrote down all of this information, and they walked by everybody, and you had to take pictures of this, and you had to memorize this. And anyways, that was not fun. But then we finally got to Israel. And so we drove up out of Jericho along to the Mediterranean Sea. We drove north, and we drove through Tel Aviv, and we got to a city north of Tel Aviv. And then this is actually our hotel. It was one of the more beautiful hotels that we stayed in. Right on the Mediterranean Sea. We were up quite high. And this was the view from our hotel window. We had a balcony for that day, and you could go out on the balcony and sit and see the entire Mediterranean Sea in front of you. It was just gorgeous. And Sharon and I, after dinner, before dinner, I can't remember which, we took a walk, and we walked out of our hotel down along the coastline and down, and we got right to the Mediterranean Sea. And I think we have some seashells from the Mediterranean Sea, and I don't know, we gave them to the kids, so who knows where they are now. But we had them, and so it was very windy, very cold. We got rained on, so you can see us in our raincoats, but we enjoyed the Mediterranean Sea. And that was the end of our time in Jordan. From there, now we're in Israel. All the rest of my pictures will be in Israel. We're gonna see Caesarea by the sea tomorrow. Caesarea by the sea, and some incredible things that happened there. That's where Paul was imprisoned for quite a while, and where he got to talk to what's the king that he got to talk to, where he said, "You almost convinced me," before he sent him off to Rome. All of those. And, yep. So we'll share all those pictures next time and go through quite a few things. Now that we're in Israel, every single event that we go to has massive biblical significance. So we'll get to show you all of those pictures. Sharon.
Just one interesting fact. So in Petra was built by the Nabateans. And the interesting biblical fact is Herod was a Nabatean. So that was just an interesting fact that I thought I would mention.
There you go. I didn't get that one recorded. Any other comments or questions about anything you saw this morning? Becky.
That brown desert and then the lush green, do you think that's where Abraham and Lot split ways?
I don't know the biblical location of Sodom and Gomorrah, but that would have been, that would have been pretty similar. That's why Lot would have chosen to go that direction, because it would have been near water, and the water would have been rich and green, and Abraham would have been more in the mountains, which are dependent upon rain. The cool thing is, when it rains, the whole desert turns green for about a week or two, and then it dies and it turns back into brown dirt. So it would have been very dependent on the desert rains, whereas when you're by a river, you have a constant supply of water and it's green year round.
Oh, I guess part of my understanding of Israel is God did bless it. It was a very productive land before the captivity, and he also, it became dormant and dry. And I'm not sure exactly why, but,
Yes.
but it was different than
Right.
that in the past.
Right. There's oftentimes God talks about how Israel would be dependent upon him for the former and the latter rains. And it was part of the Mosaic covenant that if they kept God's law, God would bless them, and he would send rain when they needed it in the spring and in the fall, and he would turn that land into a land flowing with milk and honey. But if they didn't obey him, if they turned him, then they would suffer the curses of the Mosaic covenant. And one of the curses of the Mosaic covenant was a drought. Eventually the riverbeds themselves dry up and you have nothing. So it was a land where they were dependent upon the Lord to send the rains to keep them in business. Yes.
I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but Sodom and Gomorrah is considered where the Dead Sea is today. And if you actually look at the Earth's crust is actually fractured all the way to northern Africa because of the destruction that God had sent towards Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Somehow when we were at the Dead Sea, that never got brought up, but that's fascinating. I had never looked into the biblical location of Sodom and Gomorrah, so man, that's pretty fascinating. Anything else? Debbie.
In some areas you went, were the women in your group required to wear head covering?
No. Mm-mm. Never.
A trivia, but what I think is kind of neat, the Bedouins, it has become the term of like nomadic people, but they're traditionally two main peoples. One is the Kenites of Abraham's second wife, and the other is Kedarites, which are Ishmaelites. So I just felt like that was kind of
Yes. Yeah, one of the things that our guide, our Jordanian guide, did really well when we were standing on top of Mount Nebo was she actually pointed to the different parts of where you could see, and she would say, that's the country of the Moabites, and that's the country of and she would tell all of these ites and where all they were. So that was pretty fascinating. So just so much biblical significance in all of this.
We've done one more thing. That God said in Leviticus, he said, you open your arms to these nomadic people, he said, because you were one once. And that's true. Abraham, he lived in a tent. He was like one of those veterans, but God blessed him and he settled.
Right.
But
Especially in Egypt. Yep. They were foreigners. They were exiles. Yep. Yep. Good. All right. Lord willing, next week then we will pick up here and we will continue on our tour in Israel and start to show you all of the amazing things in the land of Israel. We spent an entire week in Israel, so just so much to show you, and looking forward to doing that. You're dismissed for a few minutes before we come back for our morning worship.